With the departure of Josh Reynolds, the Lions are now a team that seem to be interested in adding yet another wide receiver. But for many Lions fans, they have a much bigger question about a wide receiver that is already on the roster. And we're going to talk about it in this episode, folks, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Lions fans, and welcome back yet once again for another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So, for today's episode, folks, we're going to do a little bit of a compare analysis here when it comes to this conversation, because this is a conversation that kind of takes a little bit about what's been going on in the offseason, but also kind of looks a little bit further ahead to what we're going to possibly expect, what we can possibly look forward to in the regular season that's coming up in 2024. And so that's kind of what we're going to be getting into with this episode, because I know everybody's really focused on the draft. I mean, for crying out loud, the draft is like 2.5 weeks away. And I definitely want to make sure we keep our focus there for a little bit. But sometimes you also have to keep in tandem this conversation that you're having with pieces that you already have on the roster and how those pieces may or may not work in, light of what is about to happen. So that's kind of where this conversation's about to go here. So let's get into it. When we think about it, ever since Josh Reynolds was a guy that we knew that had been on the last year of his contract, there were a lot of people that were wondering whether or not the Lions were going to bring back Josh Reynolds. Obviously, we now know that the Lions tried to bring him back. They were interested in bringing him back, but Josh Reynolds decided that he wanted to go and play for the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos gave him a 2-year, $14 million contract. So now that means that there is an open spot in the wide receiver core that needs to be filled. Now, that then gives us a huge kind of a conversation topic that some people have been talking on and off about. Well, are the Lions going to draft a wide receiver? Are they maybe going to sign a veteran wide receiver? Maybe they'll trade a wide receiver. Or maybe they won't do anything. We don't know. When it comes to the potential of drafting a wide receiver, that's probably the most enticing offer in my opinion, because there's a lot of really good wide receivers in this draft this year. This is a very deep wide receiver core this year for the NFL draft. And there's definitely been some names that have been thrown out that have been associated as potential guys that the Lions could really be interested in. Such names as Xavier Leggett, Devontae Walker, Brendan Rice, and a couple of others have been brought up as potential targets that the Lions could decide to go after in maybe the second, third, or fourth round, depending upon who's available. So those are all possibilities that the Lions could go for in that regard. The other option is that maybe the Lions might go out after, the draft and maybe sign a veteran. Or maybe they could trade for somebody. Or some people are thinking, well, maybe the Lions might not do any of that nonsense and maybe they might give Donovan Peoples-Jones a chance because they decided to bring him back. Which, again, these are all possibilities. We're not officially going to know what the Lions are going to do realistically until, 1, the draft is concluded, but also 2, once we kind of get through the second wave of free agency, because typically right after the draft happens is the second wave of free agency where teams are really starting to solidify the remainder of their roster before they start getting ready for spring camp, before they start getting ready for mini camps, and then obviously training camp, and then preseason, and now we're right back to football season, which it sounds a lot quicker than what I'm giving it credit for, but that's just me giving a very big summation of it. Now, here's the thing. While the question of what the Lions will do to replace the loss of Josh Reynolds is definitely on everyone's mind, and again, everybody's trying to figure out how the Lions are going to handle this. To me, there's a much more immediate conversation that needs to be had while in tandem with that conversation. And that is honestly going to be this conversation. Will this finally be the year that wide receiver Jameson Williams will have his breakout moment? Will he actually, take that step that a lot of Lions fans have been waiting earnestly for him to do? And Depending upon who you ask, you are going to get a myriad of answers. For some people, it's going to be maybe. For others, it's going to be yes. And for others still, I'm just going to say this, they're going to say they don't care. Now, why is that the case? Why is there such a vast chasm, if you will, for certain Lions fans when it comes to this conversation? Well, let's think about the maybe. The maybe are people that I think are the most, I would say, kind of like they're sitting back and waiting and watching. Because it's going to depend, in their opinion, on if the Lions make another move to acquire a wide receiver. Like I said, whether it's they draft one, whether it's they trade for one, or whether it's they sign one. Because if you bring another person in, that means that's more competition. That means that that's somebody else that Jameson Williams is going to have to compete to get reps with or potentially get receptions with. For those that say yes, absolutely, that is because they are going off of what both Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have stated, and plus also just the logic of the situation. J-Mo is slotted supposedly to be the number 2 wide receiver this year. Both Holmes and Campbell stated that they are going to make sure that they put J-Mo in a position to be that number 2 wide receiver because that's what they want him to be, right behind the number 1 guy, which is obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown. And ain't nobody going to disagree on that point. Because again, obviously the Lions drafted Jameson Williams to be that number 2 wide receiver after we saw what we got with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we know that Jameson Williams has an ability to be a weapon. And again, we saw him show some progress last year, so obviously there is a natural logic pattern, there's a natural logic progression that this should be the year that he should step up and take more of a starting role in that regard, especially with Josh Reynolds gone. Now, for those that say no, that they don't really care, is that there are still some people, and again, I've talked to some people about this, not naming any names, but there are some people that are still kind of turned off to Jameson Williams due to the fact that in the first year he was injured, he really didn't do a whole lot, and when we did get to see him a little bit, there was drop problems. And then in the second year, there was the gambling suspension, which took away about a third of his season. So it's like, okay, actually it was a fourth, pardon me. So it was a fourth of the season that was gone because they reduced the suspension from 6 to 4 games. Either way, this is where controversy arises. It depends on who you're talking to in this area because for a lot of Lions fans, they just don't really know what is going to happen with Jameson Williams. There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of opinion. But nobody really knows what we're going to get out of Jameson Williams this upcoming year. That's why this is controversial for some people because it's like they want to see Jameson Williams to succeed because obviously he was a first-round draft pick. We traded up for him, so it's like, hey, we want to see the guy succeed. But we don't know if he is. So here's the thing. When it comes to this controversial player, because again, for those that think that Jameson Williams is no longer controversial, you need to check social media. He's still controversial. It's definitely taken a much lighter tone. It's definitely taken a much softer tone in comparison to where it was at the beginning of last year. But for some people, he's still controversial. But for me, my take is that regardless of the controversy that surrounds Jameson Williams, as far as the first and second year that he's been with the Lions, I believe that he is primed to have his breakout year this year, and there's a couple of reasons why I believe Jameson Williams is primed for it. Let's think about this for just a couple of moments here. The first reason that I can think about this is because this is going to be Jameson Williams' third year with quarterback Jared Goff. Again, I can't overstate this enough. The ability for quarterbacks and wide receivers to have a consistent relationship, to have an ability to build chemistry, to have an ability to understand each other by either verbal or nonverbal cues is absolutely paramount when you are talking about quarterbacks and wide receivers. It's just crucial. Again, there have been many wide receivers that have said, listen, all I had to do when I went out on a field was just look at my quarterback and I knew exactly what he wanted me to do. I didn't even have to hear an audible. I just knew, hey, based upon what I'm seeing, based upon what he's seeing, I know exactly what route to run. And we started to see that with what Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff has. Now, obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been available since day one with Jared Goff. Not the case with Jameson Williams. But Jameson Williams was through all of training camp last year except when he got injured. But again, he was there. This year, I fully expect that that's going to be a case where he's going to be available for the full training camp and he's going to be able to practice the full training camp. And I believe that that is going to have a huge benefit for Jameson Williams and obviously for Jared Goff. And again, like I said earlier, We saw progression last year with how Jared Goff and Jameson Williams were starting to get on the same page. We saw a couple of deep shots where Goff and Jameson Williams connected. We saw a couple of touchdowns where those two were on the same page. So again, that rapport, that chemistry is definitely building. It's definitely getting better. And I expect that in the third year that these two are together, with Goff being the starting quarterback, Jameson Williams now getting a chance to be the number 2 wide receiver, that is going to further progress itself. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, to kind of go in the same line of thought, it's also Jameson Williams' third year in Ben Johnson's offense, in Ben Johnson's system. For me, again, just as important as it is for a wide receiver to have that connection, that chemistry, that rapport with a quarterback, it's also important to be in a system that you are familiar with, in a system that you've been nurtured in a system that you have grown in. This is his third year in Ben Johnson's system. For me, I would think naturally that for Jameson Williams, he should know that system now very, very well. He should know the checks. He should know the language. He should know the route tree. He should know what to expect from Ben Johnson just as well as he knows what to expect from Jared Goff. So again, these two are very, very similar. Being in Ben Johnson's system and working with Jared Goff, I fully expect that those two together, Goff and Johnson, will get the most out of Jameson Williams. I truly believe that. The third reason why I believe that Jameson Williams is going to take that next step is because, again, I kind of hinted at it a little bit, but Jameson Williams is fully healthy right now. He's had the whole offseason to get himself healthy. Doesn't have any banged up, has no bruises or bangs up or boo-boos, whatever. He's fully healthy. And as far as we know, again, knock on wood and hope and pray to dear God this doesn't jinx anything, but he has no pending or active issues with law enforcement or with the NFL. So again, that right there means that there should be no issues going forward. It's all steam ahead. We don't have to worry about something potentially coming up. And again, I'm not saying that because Jameson Williams has been known to get into trouble. I'm just simply saying, hey, what happened in season 1, and hey, what happened at season 2? We don't have to worry about that for this part of the year because it's like, okay, we haven't heard anything. I don't expect we're going to hear anything. I hope we don't hear anything. So for me, with those things taken out of the way that we had to deal with in year 1 and year 2, I also believe that's going to help him out. And then finally, as you guys all know, I graduated from college with a history major. There's the historical aspect. Again, one of the things that I have learned over the years is that wide receiver is a position that either you can come straight into the NFL and you have a lot of immediate success, or it might take you some time before you officially catch on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys really quickly what I mean by that and why I think Jameson Williams is primed to have his breakout year based upon historical trends. Let's take a look at these 5 guys really quickly. The first guy I'm going to bring up is Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin, Hall of Fame wide receiver, won 3 Super Bowls with the Cowboys in the 1990s. Everybody looks at him as one of the best receivers in the 1990s, opposite of guys like Jerry Rice and a couple of others. But would it surprise you that Michael Irvin didn't have his breakout year, like his year where he fully became like the Michael Irvin that we knew him to be, until his fourth year in the NFL in 1991? In that year, he had 93 receptions, over 1,500 yards, a 16.4 average a catch with 8 touchdowns. That is a absolutely stupendous season, especially when you consider the fact that that's in the early 90s. For a wide receiver, that is just unbelievable. And think about this. Those 1,500 yards that he had in that one season, that was more than his 3 previous years combined in receiving yard total. So yeah, Michael Irvin, it took him 4 years to have his breakout year, but once he broke out, he never looked back. That's wide receiver number 1. Wide receiver number 2, Tim Brown, another legendary wide receiver from the 1990s. Played with the Raiders pretty much. He had his breakout year in season number 6. It took him 6 years before he really had a breakout year. In that year, he had 80 receptions for almost 1,200 yards, 14.8 an average a catch with 7 touchdowns. That was in 1993, folks. So again, this right here, what I'm trying to show is for some wide receivers, for some guys, it does take them a little bit of time. Then we move to the next wide receiver. A lot of people ought to remember this guy, Hines Ward, the wide receiver that played pretty much only with the Steelers. In fact, I think it was only with the Steelers. Anyway, His breakout season, again, much like Michael Irvin, was in his 4th year in the NFL. In that year, he had 94 receptions, 1,000 yards pretty much. It was 1,003, 10.7 an average a catch with 4 touchdowns. That was his breakout year. And again, that was in 2001. So again, it took Hines Ward some time before he caught on, especially considering the fact that, hey, you got to go back to the late 90s and the early 2000s. The Steelers were still considered a physical ground and pound team. So yeah, it kind of took him a little bit of time to get used to that. Plus on top of that, the quarterbacks that the Steelers had in the late 90s and early 2000s, I'm going to be honest, were not exactly the best. But again, still, that is something to keep in mind. Then we go to the next wide receiver, another guy that I know a lot of people remember, Steve Smith. Steve Smith had his breakout year in his 3rd season, which this would be Jameson Williams' 3rd year. In Steve Smith's 3rd season, he had 88 receptions for a little over 1,100 yards, 12.6 an average a catch, and 7 touchdowns. Again, I'm trying to get you guys to see a pattern here. It sometimes takes time for these wide receivers to get a chance to fully break out, to fully actually get acclimated to the NFL. And then finally, everybody ought to know this guy because, well, his son's currently in the NFL draft right now. Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison's breakout year, his 4th season in the NFL, happened in 1999. 115 receptions, over 1,600 receiving yards with 14.5 an average a catch and 12 touchdowns. That's all 5 receivers that I could think of just right off the top of my head that, hey, you know what? These are all guys that have a couple of things in common. Number one, they're considered greats. They are considered some of the best wide receivers that have ever played the game. Number two, these are all guys that have a lot of serious accolades. They've either been to Super Bowls, they've won Super Bowls, they've got multiple Pro Bowls, whatever. They've got a lot of serious hardware when it comes to their career accolades. And then finally, the biggest connection that all 3 of them have that's in connection with Jameson Williams, it took them a couple of years before they were really able to break out and actually start having that NFL success. Some a little bit more than others, a.k.a. Tim Brown. But my whole point is this. For these guys, it took them some time. Now, here's why I think that Jameson Williams is going to also get into that. Because again, you're talking about Ben Johnson and Jared Goff. You're talking about a top 5, top 10 offense with a near top 5, definite top 10 quarterback. When you start putting all those pieces together and you're working with Jameson Williams and you're including him more in the offense, it's just a logical, natural process that, hey, he's going to get more He's going to get more opportunities to showcase himself as a weapon. He's going to get more opportunities to showcase what he can do on the field. And for me, I believe that the Lions, with Ben Johnson and Jared Goff, they're going to use every opportunity to exploit what he can do, and that is going to give Jameson Williams a huge boost, not only in confidence, but also in output. So for me, it's like, listen, when you have all of these pieces that are working together in tandem, Goff, Johnson, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, you have David Montgomery, you have Sam Laporta, you have this offensive line. It's going to benefit everybody. But when we're talking about Jameson Williams taking that next step, it's really going to benefit him because he has all these other pieces that are going to help him out, which is going to help out his ability to be a producer on the field. Now again, I don't know if the Lions are going to draft or trade or sign a wide receiver. But even if they did, I don't see that guy overtaking Jameson Williams' ability to be the number 2 wide receiver. At best, probably the number 3 guy, and it's probably going to take some targets away from him. But I fully expect that this is going to be the year that Jameson Williams officially breaks out. Now, how much of a breakout he's going to have, whether it's over 1,000 yards or not, I don't know. I would like to think it's over 1,000 yards, but we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, folks, I figured I'd present this evidence. I figured I'd present it because I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Will this be his year? Will this not be his year? I believe it will be. I believe it's his time to seize the moment and to take that step into being the wide receiver we envisioned he was going to be when we drafted him 12 overall in 2022. But anyway, folks, I'm going to end the episode. I've presented the evidence. I've presented my logic. So with having said that, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. And I also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past, forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe. It helps out the channel. But also, make sure you do this as well. Please turn on that bell notification icon that goes along with it at the bottom, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, again, subscription numbers are always going up. But we want to make sure you guys turn on that notification so that way you guys never miss anything else as soon as I push it out. Also encourage y'all to please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel spreads, the greater the channel grows. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope you all are having a great day. Hope you're all having a blessed day. Hope you got something that makes you smile and makes you happy. And I hope you all enjoyed the content. And with that, God bless to everybody. Hope you all are doing well. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.